Welcome, everyone, to Rising Out of the Chrysalis, Stories That Inspire with Marisa Grace, where we share life stories of struggle and triumph, not only of my own life experiences, but also through the experiences of my guests as a way to help you have breakthroughs and find hope in your own life. I'm Marisa Grace, and today I have a special guest here, Ashlee, who has an amazing, inspiring story to share with all of us. So welcome, Ashlee. So happy to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me.
So why don't you go ahead, introduce yourself, tell us who you are, what you do, and tell us about your story.
Yes, so my name is Ashlee Hoelck, and currently I am a newly certified coach, and I live in Texas with my husband and my two sons. And the reason that I became a certified coach is because 2 years ago, I healed 12 years of chronic back pain, and it was with mindset work. So it turns out that my pain was actually emotional trauma from an abusive relationship that I was in back in my teenage years. So I got into this relationship when I was about 16 years old, and it was always pretty toxic. It was emotionally abusive. There was a lot of manipulation. There was cheating and lying and gaslighting. And when I moved out of the house and he finally had more access to me, that's when it turned physically abusive. And that physical abuse happened. It was pretty much a weekly cycle. I always knew that if it was getting close to 6 or 7 days, I was going to get abused. And it lasted for about 9 months. And it kind of ended in a crazy way. I fought back for the first time, and I don't really remember when I fought back. It was, I always say it was like I saw red and I kind of blacked out. And I just started fighting back after he had punched me in the face. My lip was busted and I started screaming and kicking, and I was laying on the bed. And he could tell that I kind of wasn't there anymore. And so he started saying, "Stop, stop." And with his hands extended out, and I kicked his hand and he started screaming. And I kind of jolted out of it. It was like, what happened? And he ended up going to the hospital. I had shattered two bones in his wrist, and he had to wear a cast for like 8 weeks. And that was the last time that he physically abused me. That wasn't quite the end of the relationship, though, because I was still very much in love. It felt like love, and I
Right.
know now that it wasn't love. It was more of just being so uh, wrapped up in the relationship. And about a year and a half after that, so when I was around 20, the relationship kind of ended, and we started seeing other people. At this time, I obviously had some pretty severe mental and emotional problems. I had very bad PTSD. I would flinch when anyone raised a hand near me and like kind of like get in a defensive mode. Loud noises were really terrifying, especially yelling. At that time, I was partying with my friends a lot. I was 21 years old. And if people were shouting, even if it was happy shouts, "Oh, we made the beer bong, we won the game," or whatever, I would kind of cower and ask people if they could just calm down and be nice. And they're like, we're just having fun. But it was just one of my triggers was the yelling. And I was very depressed. I had a lot of anxiety. I was constantly worried about all the things that could go wrong. I was so sad. I was crying all the time. I was self-harming. When I got out of the relationship, I was about 98 pounds, and I'm 5'4". So I was very small
Wow.
because for the last, year, and I lost all the weight my freshman year of college. And I always was like, most people gain 15 pounds and I lost 15 pounds. And it was just because that was the year where the abuse got really bad. And I was constantly told, you could be smaller. You could look at that girl,
By
look at how
him.
skinny she is. And I think that year, all that I ate Tiger milk bars, sugar-free Red Bulls, instant coffee, and then like my splurge would be chicken Caesar salad.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, so I lost 15 pounds. So I just felt like a shell of a person in every single way. I didn't know what I liked because I had been told what to do, how to dress, what to look like for, 4 years from the age of 16 till I was 19, 20. And those are pretty impressionable years on a young girl's life. And so I was in a really, really dark place.
Yeah,
Really,
this
really
you're
dark place.
describing, narcissistic abuse. Now, this relationship, now what were the triggers for him every time? You said it was a pattern where, every 5, 7 days you knew it was coming. So how did you know it was coming? What was the trigger for the person to just
Uh,
lash out the anger on you?
it would be the smallest things. It was like he just had like a fuse that was running out, and um those things kind of became my triggers. Like he would sit, we would be together, and he would ask, What do you want to talk about?" And I was always walking on eggshells. I was always in such like a heightened state, and
Mm-hmm.
I'd be like, I, I don't know. I don't know what to talk
Because
about.
you didn't know what word was going to trigger.
Yeah,
You,
well, it was more just because I just felt so scared all the time,
yeah.
and I was so scared to make him upset, and it just like put so much pressure on me, and I feel like it was like a freeze state, right? Like I
Mm-hmm.
just froze. I just didn't know what to say, and I like didn't want to say anything at all, but then me not saying anything, he would get like super angry at me. And even now, like 14 years later, if I'm talking to somebody and there's a pause in the conversation, I start to feel panicked, like I need to say something. I need to say something right now. And like I get
Because the
really
fear is
uncomfortable.
still, yeah, like,
Yeah, and I get
so
really
what
uncomfortable.
you're describing, I kind of experienced similar things to you, but mine came from my dad, who was an abusive alcoholic. So emotionally, verbally, physically. And I felt the same way what you're describing, that where your whole body kind of freezes and you're kind of anticipating, what's going to happen. I went through all those emotions as a teenager because, I would come home from elementary school and I would have panic attacks because I didn't know once I got home if it was going to be a good day or a bad day.
Yeah.
So anticipating that something bad was going to happen
Mhm.
and not knowing what the trigger was going to be. It could be like something my mother would say. It could have been the food. So he was very emotionally over food. He still is very emotional over food. So if the food wasn't prepared in the way he wanted it, the exact same way, it could have been delicious. And at the time, I was in charge of cooking dinner. So even if the dinner was delicious, if I didn't take the exact steps that he wanted me to take to prepare that dinner, it would have set him off.
Yeah.
And yes, that PTSD, it gets embedded in the yelling and screaming. It's like
Yeah.
it shakes, it's in your body. Your cells have memory, and those cells remember that in your whole body. So when somebody will yell or the noises come on, it's not that you're even thinking about it. Before you even think about it, your body's already reacting to it.
Yeah. Exactly. Can I ask you
Yeah,
a question?
sure.
Do you find it hard to make food for other people now?
No, I overcame that actually. He still criticizes the food, but now I'm in a better place where I don't allow him to get to me.
Hmm.
So I like he will not eat my food for most of the time. So now it's kind of like he knows that now I don't tolerate any of his nonsense,
Hmm.
that because I realize that it's him emotionally, he's still dealing with trauma that he hasn't overcome. It has
Right.
nothing to do with me.
Mhm.
And I don't allow it to get to me. So most of the time, and we live in the same house now.
Oh,
And this
wow.
might seem a little awkward to most of you, but the reality is I've come full circle around to overcome the whole trauma, to come back and have my parents living with me and educating them that there's a different way of behaving.
Oh.
But the interesting thing was my mom, just like you got into the relationship at 16. She married him at 16. So
Mhm.
she's been dealing with this narcissistic abuse since she was 16. And to her, it has become, it was normal behavior. She didn't realize that that's like totally not normal.
Yeah.
So by me coming back in and intervening now that was able to overcome the trauma and learn, how to deal with it, to come in and intercept the relationship and teach them something different.
Wow.
So he still had, the behavior of yelling at her and screaming and telling her the food wasn't right, even though it was delicious. If she prepared the food, he was saying the same thing. This is shit, excuse my language. This is garbage, blah, 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 blah. And, I had to form a coalition with the family. And while I did this, I just want everybody to know I didn't have my children involved. So I allowed my daughter to have dinner separately from us and not to be in the same room.
Mhm.
And she still doesn't have, usually dinner with the whole family, only sometimes, because now she kind of got used to it. So she wouldn't be exposed to this. So she wouldn't participate. But collectively, my husband, myself, and my mother, I we form a coalition, and I taught them that, okay, when he acts in a certain way, this is how you're going to respond, and do not feed into it. So we started doing that, and the way he would react to it, knowing that, okay, now I'm getting a different response, he would get upset because nobody was responding to his behavior. So he'd walk away upset like a toddler would when you yell, when you ignore a toddler, when you ignore your child and they want your attention. And then he would go in a garage and eat his dinner and then come back an hour later
Wow.
until he got the message, until he understood, okay, I'm not supposed, but I've been doing this.
No.
He didn't realize the impact it had on the people around him. But the surprising part was my mom not realizing how much it was impacting her and how much,
Mm.
not normal those behaviors were. She just accepted it over the years,
Oh.
even though that emotionally, you know, she was torn and suffered so much.
Yeah.
And, for a lot of people that don't understand, why do people stay in those relationships? Well, it's not that easy to just walk away if you're vulnerable to, you start interpreting that that's love and that's how, their affection is given to you. Well, this is how he expresses love. And that's the only way I know how to receive love because I don't have any other reference.
Yeah.
So if you didn't have a relationship prior to that where they showed you what love was like, you didn't have a reference point to go off of, right?
Mhm.
And if this was the first time where you actually experienced love, like she did, she was 16 when she got married. To her, this is love. This is what I have to do. Like, I marry this person, I have to devote myself. This is the way it has to be. The belief system, the religion, the culture. So when we don't have a reference point to say, wait a minute, this doesn't sound right, this is not love,
Mhm.
and we start interpreting that these behaviors is love. when it isn't.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult to just leave because we want to feel loved. The other thing is fear, because knowing how dangerous the person might be, if they leave the relationship, there might be a fear that that person might harm them, especially if they've been threatened.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if you experienced that where, you know, if you leave me, I'll come after you. I'll find you wherever you go. Um, did you
I
experience
no,
that?
not that way.
Mm-hmm.
But I feared leaving because I just didn't want to leave the relationship. Like I thought, because there were such good times too, So I was
Yeah.
like, it's not all the time, it's just sometimes. But I knew, and it was on Valentine's Day, when he like was choked me out on the floor, and I was almost losing consciousness, and I realized that if I didn't leave, that he might end up killing me. And that was when I first realized, and it was a few months after that when my subconscious fought back for me.
Oh, that's wonderful that you came to that realization. It's like a wonderful thing that early instead of being stuck on there for a
Yeah.
longer period of
Yeah, because
time.
the physical abuse was, I think, only 9 months, but in that 9 months, it got so aggressive, and it was, every single week, and every time it was getting worse and worse and worse. And I just knew like this is going like exponentially fast, and I need to get out.
Yeah, I'm glad that you did. And, you took that step to get out. The other thing that happens in these narcissistic relationships is, they confuse you because, okay, one day they're beating you up or, verbally insulting you and calling you all these names. And then the next day they're buying you flowers, treating you like you're the best thing in their life. So what it does, it creates confusion in your brain because now your brain is like associating pain and love,
Mhm.
that they go together.
Yeah.
And this is what they do. They'll reward you, they'll treat you amazing.
Buy you new shoes and clothes and
Yes. And then 2 days later, they're going back to the same pattern,
yeah.
treating you like you're garbage, beating you up, and then it continues again. Then they're gonna reward you for it.
Yeah.
Um, and then you're like, what is this? I mean, if he's buying me this, this must be love. But the interesting thing that I have found is these type of narcissistic relationships don't just happen in relationships between a man and a woman. It can happen within a group of people or like um, an association or a club where you have somebody that might be like a leader or somebody that might, kind of use the same type of, they may not be beating you up, but they might treat you or abuse you verbally and insult you, and then the next thing they're doing is rewarding you. And I have absorbed this in to show you how easy people can get manipulated into different things. It doesn't have to be a relationship between a man and a woman.
Yeah.
You can find yourself, like, you have kids, I have kids, they could be part of a team, and maybe that team leader can have the same characteristics. They may not be beating up the kids or the parents, but they may manipulate them in the same way where they kind of push them over the edge and then reward them. I'll make you the leader. You could be up front, you could be this. And, just so they can manipulate them for their own satisfaction or, use, whatever
Yeah.
they have to gain from it. And the parents easily get caught up in it and they don't even realize it. But
Wow.
now that you know the signs, this is a great thing. And even if whoever's listening, it's a great thing to teach your kids. to teach them about all these signs of the characteristics of these individuals for them to be on alert and to recognize them. So they, once they get into those relationships, they're able to make the right choices and be like, oh, wait a minute, I'm not putting up with this. I know where this is going. My mother taught me, and that's what I did with my own child. I taught her. I didn't just pull her out. I taught her. I said, okay, watch that person, see what she's doing. This is what she's going to do next. And this is why she's doing it. And she stood up for herself. She's like, I'm not putting up with this. I'm not going to let you manipulate me. So it's really, even though we go through these painful experiences, we go through them for a reason too. It's not because, the universe wants to punish us. It taught us something that we could then turn around and teach our kids and others so they don't fall into the same trap. So I want to know from you is what helped you get over some of this trauma?
Yes. So in the beginning, I would say like my first steps, the first one was that I decided to start smiling more. This was when I think I was like 19 still, I was 19, 20. And my thinking was, okay, people will stop looking at me like I'm some pathetic person because I'm like always sad and crying and frowning and just like slouched over and miserable. And I was like, maybe they'll just leave me alone, stop asking me what's wrong, And the other one was, I thought maybe if I'm smiling, like I'll feel happy. Just that was my thought. And, I've learned recently with all my research and reading about trauma and the brain and all of this, that it actually does trick your brain into thinking that you're happy. And so, I mean, you can see me, no one can see me on the podcast, but I'm always smiling. And it's just something that I started doing, and I've been smiling since the last 14 years. And the second step that I did was I stopped watching the news. I was already so sad and depressed, and the news just made me more sad. Reading any sort of sad story, it just brought me down a lot. And so I realized that I needed to take care of myself, and that meant kind of shutting out all of the noise of the world. And so that was really, really helpful so that I could focus on myself. And then those first few years were pretty rough. And then after that, I just tried to be a kind person. I just tried to treat people how I wanted to be treated. I had a very long history of kids being mean to me growing up too. And I didn't want people to feel the way that I felt. So I just started being nicer, being kinder. And during this time, this is when my back pain started. So it started when I was 21. When I was 21, I threw my back out twice in 1 month, and I couldn't walk for like 3 or 4 days each time. And I didn't get in an accident. I didn't pick up something heavy. The first time I sneezed, and the second time I coughed. And I went to the doctor because it was concerning for a 21-year-old to be losing the ability to walk for 5 days of the month. And they did x-rays. All they said was that I had bulging on my L4, L5, and that it was the worst that they'd ever seen for someone of my age. And so I got sent to physical therapy for, I don't know, like 8 or 12 weeks. They gave me these exercises, and I don't know if anyone's been to physical therapy, but they're really boring exercises.
Yes.
They're like, move this leg 2 inches up and back 20 times, 12 times in a row. Like, they're just very small movements that are very boring. And honestly, I didn't really do them much because I was 21. I was working 2 jobs. I was always working 2 jobs at a bar, restaurant. And then when I wasn't working, I was going out and partying, enjoying the town. And my back pain just kept getting worse and worse. The first 5 years since it started, I threw my back out 8 times. And every time it was some small movement. I believe the last time that I threw it out was when my oldest son was 15 months. I was giving him a bath, and then I picked him up to get him out of the bath. And at this time, I was like a seasoned vet with my throwing out my back. And I felt the twinge, the ever telling twinge. And I knew that my back was about to be in excruciating pain within 5 to 7 seconds. So I grabbed my wet, slippery baby, walked, 10 feet to my bedroom and dropped him on the bed, then called my husband and said, "You got to get home." Because I knew I was about to be in excruciating pain. And this whole time, I never took pain medicine for my back. Um, I would only take it when I threw my back out. So those 8 times that I threw it out, because it was like continual muscle spasms, just the worst excruciating pain, and I could barely walk for days. But I never took medicine. I would try stretching. My husband, he met me about 8 years ago, so I was still deep in my pain, and he knew not to bother me in the morning because when I would wake up, it was the worst, and it wasn't just like a backache or like, oh, my back's a little bit sore. It felt like the muscles were being ripped off of my spine, on my low spine. It was so intense. And in the morning, he knew, don't bother her. Like, let her drink her coffee, be really, really nice to her, and just wait to be spoken to. And it was awful. I would tell my son, like, Mommy can't do it today. My back hurts too much. And it
Now,
kept me from doing
do you
things.
still get those back pains, or did you recover from those?
No, so that I finally healed about 2 years ago. There was a period, it was after I threw my back out with my son, and I was tired of telling him, like, oh, we can't do something today, because I always stayed home during the day. And so we'd be together all the time. And I decided to go to yoga because I'm like, okay, everyone says yoga is good for backs. Let's do the yoga. And I found one in town that had a daycare. I was like, oh, this is perfect. And so I started going 3 or 4 times a week. And about 3 months into it, my back pain went away. And I was like, oh, this is great. My back was just knotted up. I don't know. I just needed to stretch it. And so I went for a year, and then I was pregnant with my second son about halfway through, and all of a sudden my son stopped liking the daycare and would literally run out. So I had to stop going. I had to cancel my membership, and I couldn't go because I worked at night 5 to 7 nights a week. My husband worked during the day, and on the weekend, I just wanted to be with my family. So I stopped going, and I kind of knew, like, it's going to come back. It's going to come back. And about 4 months later, I got the first little ache in my back. And I said, oh, dear God, not again. And within like 2 to 3 weeks, it was back full force, as bad as it had ever been. But this time it was so much worse because I had just had 15 months free after 6 years of excruciating pain. And I got a taste of what it was like to be able to jump off of the ground with both feet, to move freely and not be paranoid that my back was going to throw out any second. And so it was depressing. And I had, postpartum anxiety from my second kiddo. I was just like so anxious about everything. We were living with my father-in-law temporarily before we bought a home in a different state. And, that was difficult for me after living on my own since I was like 17. So there was just a lot going on. And then my back pain came back. And so it was February of 2020, and I decided I got to go back to yoga. So I started going back, and I'm pretty sure we all know what happened next. March 2020, the whole world shut down and my yoga studio. So I could no longer go to yoga. And then on top of it, I was like, well, now I have pandemic anxiety. And it was kind of a blessing in disguise for me because I finally had space to myself. I didn't have to go to work 5 nights a week, but I was still getting unemployment. So I wasn't stressed about money. And I had time with my kids. And I kind of went on this personal development deep dive, deeper than I'd ever gone. I started doing a morning gratitude practice. I started waking up before the kids, and first it was just drinking hot coffee in silence, right? And then it just grew. I started reading all of these personal development books. And, I'd write my gratitude and then the 10 things that I was working on that I wanted to achieve, goals, affirmations, things like that. And one of them was I'm back pain free since 2020. And so it was a big goal of mine. And then, I manifested our absolute dream house. We had such an incredible move. Like everything was going so perfectly. You know, we bought this great house. My husband's amazing. I've got two awesome sons, but my back still hurt so bad when we had visitors come see us in like October of the 2020, right after we bought the house. I spent their visit laying on the ground because I couldn't sit in a chair. I couldn't stand. My back hurt so bad. So I just spent the visit laying on the ground, talking to them, laughing and smiling from the ground though, because I'm still in so much pain. And I was like, what is going on? Like, I'm doing great in every like area of my life. Why am I in so much pain? And around that time, I found like I heard on social media or I saw something about how emotional trauma can be stored as physical pain. And obviously, we've just talked about it. I have a lot of emotional trauma, but it's been 12 years. I was like, could this really be affecting me? And also, what? That doesn't make any sense. Like, how can emotional trauma be stored in my body? Like, that's crazy. Like,
Yes, I
fat
know.
can
Like
be stored in my body, but
a
not
lot of people
emotion.
don't realize that, when we don't deal with our emotions over time, the body has to, deal with it somehow. And what it does, it tries to grab your attention by manifesting it into a physical. So, if you're not dealing with the emotions, you're not crying over it, you're not processing, the body will try to get your attention some other way to like, hey, I'm going to give you pain here. I'll give you pain there. I'll give you gut issues, whatever it is, until you deal with your emotional pain.
Yeah, yeah. And I realized, the pain started when I was 21. And that was like, I think we were still seeing each other like once every couple of months when I was 20. So I was like, this is kind of when it like just ended. And that, I mean, I guess that would make sense. And I kind of just opened myself up to the idea because heat and ice weren't working, stretching wasn't working, yoga wasn't working, nothing else was working. And I was just, maybe this is it. I've tried everything else. And I ended up doing an online manifestation course. And I just thought it would be really fun and easy and light and, make a vision board. And what ended up happening, it was like this deep healing container, just all of these things that I hadn't really heard about, doing inner child work meditations, cord cutting meditation. I wrote an angry letter to my ex, and it was at that point that I realized how angry I still was, how much hate I had for him still, how much I wish that he was not doing well. And, I realized that all of that anger and that hate, it was only really hurting me. And so I went through this process. It's like an 8-week course, but I kind of sped through it when the kids were asleep and my husband was at work, over around 4 weeks. And of course, there was lots of crying, lots of just shaking and crying and sobbing and just releasing everything. And after that 5 weeks, I woke up and my back pain was gone. And this was like right before Thanksgiving, because I remember my father-in-law came for Thanksgiving and my pain was gone, but I didn't tell anybody because I still like in the beginning, I thought it's going to come back, or I thought I'm just having a good week. Like it's something's going to give. And then after a couple of months, I was like, okay, I don't know what happened because it felt like magic to me.
It is magical once we are able to process those emotions. It is like the best healing tool that you can possibly, do. Like no pain medicine is gonna, totally take that away. Everything is just kind of temporary that we try. We always try to, treat the physical. But once we treat the root of the emotional problem, it is permanent healing.
Yeah.
And it's so
Yeah.
powerful, isn't it? And
It
it's
is.
amazing.
It's so
And
so
now,
wild.
and this whole ride of yours going through this process brought you to what you're doing today, that you're starting a podcast. So tell us about that.
Yes. So after I realized that my back pain wasn't coming back and that I had done, all of this mindset work and this healing that actually helped my back pain. And then I realized, 1 in 4 women will be in a physically aggressive relationship. And that's only what's reported. I never reported mine. I talked to another friend who has a podcast about something similar, and she never reported hers either. So there's probably a lot more people. And how many of these people are suffering from chronic back pain or hip pain, fibromyalgia, GI issues? I know I had my own stomach issues that were really, really severe. And I realized that I needed to tell people what had happened because I kind of kept it a secret, because to me it felt weird and magical and I didn't know what to tell them. Like I did a cord cutting meditation where I took an invisible sword and I cut these energetic bonds between me and my abuser. Like it was just all, it was all so strange. But the more research that I've done and reading The Body Keeps the Score, I'm like, okay, this is starting to make sense. And so I decided that I needed to share my story. And so I started coming on podcasts and sharing my story. And that's what I've been doing all of this year, all of 2022. And I finally decided that I want to launch my own podcast, and it's called Thriving After Abuse. I just have the trailer out right now. Launch date is January 3rd. Right now I'm batching all of the interviews. I'm bringing in guest experts in their specific fields. I just did an interview with the inner child work coach, and that's what she specializes in. I've got empowerment coaches. I have NLP certified practitioners, all sorts of things, because the intention with the podcast is to, one, raise awareness that your toxic and abusive relationship is probably affecting you more than you know. And two, to inspire you that healing is possible and that healing is a journey and it's nothing to be ashamed of, and that you can fully thrive after, that you're not as is or broken, but you can continue healing. And then also to share all of the different modalities and tools and techniques and people and books that are available to help you on this healing journey, because I didn't know anything that I used existed. I knew meditation existed, but not in this deep sense. And I didn't know they existed. And I'm sure lots of people don't know that they exist as well. And so I just want to share that there's so many different things for people to kind of choose which fits for them on their healing journey.
That's wonderful. Now, how can people get a hold of you, or how can they listen to your podcast once it's out?
Yes, so I am most active on Instagram. It's just my name at Ashlee, ASHLEE _ Hoelck, HOELCK. And then if you go there, I've got my link that'll take you to my podcast and all of my other information. So you can find it all there.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ashlee, so much for coming on and sharing your story. Now, everyone, please share, subscribe, like the videos, and subscribe so you get notified every week when new videos come out, and you can listen to these amazing stories that might inspire you and even change your life. So until next week, ciao.
Bye.